says here our topic today, Islam and civilization. The first one is historical perspective, and the second one is Islamic reform, and then towards the end, solution to the modern men's problem. The first two will be together, and then we'll come to the last subject, solution to the modern men's problem. Let's solve our own problem first. Time till 4:30. 4. 4:30 is Asr.
The question was you remain here. Later you say.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay? I mean also we ask here.
No problem. I'll see you till the end, no problem.
So I'll ask another question. Sorry for that.
First, we will discuss the Muslim contributions to the world civilization. Let's see what is the opinions of the Western scholars about the Muslim contribution to the civilization, to the world civilization. Mr. Marquis, in his speeches delivered in India, so it is a wrong spelling here, India, on page 24, he says that Europe is indebted to the Muslim science, Muslims' art and Muslim literature for taking them out from the darkness of the Middle Age. Mr. Robinson's, another Western scholar, Mr. Robinson, he says in his book, The Story of Medicine, on page 174, he says that Europe was darkened at sunset, Cordoba. Cordoba, in those days, it was in Spain, one of the Muslim countries. So Cordoba was shining with public land. Europe was dirty, Cordoba built thousands of baths. Europe was lying in mud, Cordoba's streets were paved. Europe nobilities, they could not sign their name, but Cordoba's children, they went to school. Europe monks could not read their Bible. Cordoba's teacher, they created the Library of Alexandria. Now let's see what does the history says about the Muslims' civilization and what they have contributed to the world civilization. The names of the Muslim reformers and scholars will always shine amongst the most illustrious in history. Even today, on the wall of University of Paris, the pride of place is given to two Muslim physicians, two Muslim scholars. The first one is Al-Razi, and he is known as Razis. Latinized as Razis. And the second one is Ibn Sina, and he is Latinized as, his name is Latinized as Avicenna. Now let's take, who was Razi? Let's take the first one. Al-Razi, he was born in 865, and he was the author of 113 major and 28 minor works on medicine. All of this work were translated into Latin to be used in the medical schools of Western Europe. Throughout the Europe, Latin in those days, it was used as a medical language. Razis was the first doctor to write a book on pediatric, or the special ailments of children. In gynecology, he advocated the use of speculum for the examination of patients. Mr. Max Neuberger is one of the historian, an eminent writer on medical history. He writes about Rhazes in these words. Rhazes was a man of rare attainment, a tireless writer of immense productiveness, and he was an inspired teacher. Mr. Frank, another historian, he says that Rhazes discovered the cause of smallpox and many other diseases several centuries before Albert Berg. According to Dr. Karl, Rhazes was the greatest physician of all time. So this is the first Muslim physician and the first Muslim scholar who have contributed to the world civilization. Let's take the second one. The second one was Avicenna. He was born in Bukhara, and this is a place nowadays in Russia. A place in Russia. He was born in Bukhara in 980. And he was known as a prince of philosopher. He was a prince of philosopher. He excelled in many branches of learning. However, in medicine he exerted the most. In medicine he was well known. One of his outstanding work is a gigantic medical encyclopedia which was translated into Latin by Dr. Girard from Cremona in 12th century. So all of his work, it was translated into Latin. As I said, Latin in those days, it was used as a medical language. Thereafter, it was used as a textbook in the universities of Western Europe. So all the universities in Western Europe, this book, which was translated into Latin, it was used as a textbook to teach the student about medicine. Then this encyclopedia, which was written by Avicenna, it was called as Al-Qunun fil Tib. This is one of the Arabic letters. Al-Qunun fil Tib. Tib means medicine, and Qunun means like principles in medicines. And this was Latinized from the first letter of this book, Al-Qunun. It was Latinized as Canon. So now you know where your Canon cameras and Canon laptops and computers and printer comes from. It was Latinized as Canon, and it was a truly monumental work. Dr. Philip, he writes that this Canon, with its encyclopedic content, systematic arrangement, and philosophical plan, was the prominent literature of that age. It surpassed the work of Galen, Al-Razi, and Al-Majusi. From the 12th century to 17th, from the 12th right to 17th century, this work served as a chief guide to the medical science in the West, and it is still in occasional use in the Middle East. In the words of Dr. Osler from Scandinavia, it has remained a medical Bible for a longer period than any other work. The popularity of this great work may be gauged by the fact that during 15th century it was published 16 times and republished 16 times in the space of 30 years. While in 16th century it was published 20 times and reprinted very often. Indeed, Avicenna, he dominated the Western medicine for 500 years, and his findings are by no means discredited today. So these were the two Muslim scholars who have contributed to the world civilization. Besides these two, there are many other great scholars who have contributed to the world civilization. Let's take another few names. For example, Ibn al-Nafis. Now the word Ibn, in Arabic, the word Ibn, the first one you see IBN, Ibn, it stands for son. It means son. Now in many names you will see this word Ibn, Ibn, Ibn. It means son of so and so, son of so and so. Normally the Arabs, when they want to introduce themselves, they will say, I'm the son of so and so. They won't give you the actual name, they prefer that way. So the word Ibn, it means son of al-Nafis. The second one was Ali ibn al-Abbas. Another one, Ibn Abbas al-Zahrawi. Another one, Ibn Abi al-A'la. another scholar Ibn Sulaiman, another one Ibn Ghazula. Ibn Rushd, he was known as Averroes of the West, and Ibn Khatib. So these were some other Muslim great scholars who have contributed to the world civilization. Let's take the first four. We will discuss the first four. The first one, Ibn al-Nafis, second one, Ibn Ali al-Abbas, third one, Ibn Abbas al-Zahrawi, and Ibn Abi al-A'la. The time is short, that's why I'm going fast. Okay, later on maybe you can have this PowerPoint printed, or you can take the USB and copy it for yourself, whatever. So I'm going fast because the time is very short. Let's take the first four. The first one is Ibn al-Nafis. He was a great Muslim physician. He died in 1288. He was a specialist in physiology, and he was the one who gave the correct description of the blood circulation centuries before Harvey, he was another doctor, he put forward the same theory. So this Ibn al-Nafis, he was the first one who gave the correct descriptions of the blood circulation. The second one was Ibn Ali al-Abbas, another earlier Arab physician. He was one of the Muslim physicians. He died in 994. In the West, he was known as Heli Abbas. His greatest work was Kitab al-Maliki, and it was divided into two parts, theoretical and practical, each part consisting of 10 books, so 10 thick books each part. And it was such a book which covered the whole field of medicine. The third one was Ibn Abbas al-Zahrawi, another Muslim scholar. He was known as Abul Qasis in the West, and he was the greatest surgeon of the Muslim world. His book At-Tasrif Liman Ajaza At-Ta'lif, it sums up all the surgical knowledge of his time. This manual, this book, was translated into Latin and held its place for centuries. The last date of publication was 1778 at Oxford, and it also contained illustration of surgical instruments, and in fact this book laid down the foundation of surgery in the Europe. The last one, another great Muslim scholar, Ibn Abi al-A'la. His surname was Ibn Zur, and he was known as Avenzo in the West. So most of the great Muslim scholars, their name will change from their original name to something else, and all of their work was Latinized. All of their work, whether it was in Arabic or which other language, it was translated from that original language to the Latin, because Latin in those days in the universities, it was used as a medical language. So he was another Muslim surgeon whose work had a profound influence on the medical school of Europe. Now, so these were some Muslim scholars who have contributed towards the world civilization. Now we finish with the doctor. Let's talk about the hospitals now. We finish with the doctors and those great scholars who have contributed towards the world civilization. Let's talk about the hospitals. How were the hospitals in those days, and what did the Muslim have contributed in the civilization towards the hospitals? The list of hospitals, it seems endless. In Baghdad alone, the Jewish traveler Benjamin of Toledo, he noticed 60 hospitals where he was amazed to discover all the patients were fed and treated at government expenses. One of the best hospitals in Islam was built in Morocco in 1200. It was built by Abdul Wahid al-Marakishi. Here the poor patients were not only treated free, but on discharge they were given sufficient money to maintain them until they were able to find the work again. I'm sure this hospital must be full every day, because you are not only treated in the hospital, but on discharge they give you sufficient money to go and wait until you find the work again. This hospital, I'm sure it must be full every day, and the patient must be lining up outside Because when you're inside the hospital, they treat you free, everything at government expenses, give you food, look after you, everything. And then when you're leaving the hospital, here now you have to pay maybe $100, $200 for the bed in the hospital. But in this hospital, they used to give you the money to go and wait until you find the work again. So they used to give you sufficient money. This hospital must be full every day. Okay, Ibn Kowloon, he was a governor of Cairo. In 872, he built a hospital with an income of 3 lakhs rupees. 3,300,000 rupees at that time, it was too much. Here the patient, in this hospital, the patient received free board and lodging, as well as treatment in separate wards for separate disease. Different disease, different wards. This hospital also had a separate department for the treatment of insane, those people who had problems, the insane, the lunatic, so they were in separate department. The historian Neuberger, he says, the insane were humanely and more efficiently treated in the mental hospital of Islam than in Western countries. Indeed, the first European, Neuberger, he says, indeed, the first European mental hospital established by the religious order of Valencia in Spain in 1410 was modeled on a famous Muslim hospital built a century before in Cairo. Cairo is in Egypt. The biggest hospital built by the Muslim was Azad ad-Dawla at Baghdad. So this was the biggest hospital built in Islam, and it was in Baghdad in Iraq. And the description of it stands up well to comparison with many modern hospitals today. So many modern hospitals today, whatever facilities they have got, long time ago, long few centuries before, it was already there in this hospital, Azad ad-Dawla at Baghdad. Not only it had a spacious building and the most up-to-date instrument, but it had also distinguished staff has ever been found at any medical center. So the specialists, doctors from all over the world, they were in this hospital. Indeed, it was more than a hospital. It was also a university where great scholars like Nasr ibn al-Dugali, Abu Khair and Abu Yaqub, they treated the patient and they lectured the student as well. All other Muslim hospitals, says a European writer, were overshadowed by the hospital founded in Baghdad, complete with equipments, numerous trust funds, and a pharmacy. It was stocked with medicine brought from the end of the world. Okay, now we're only talking about the medicine, doctors, and the hospitals. Now let's talk about some other subject towards which the Muslims have contributed, and that is one of the other subject is mathematics. In civilization, mathematics, the Arab, they like the most mathematics. Mathematics was a science which the Arab, they favored the most. Many basic principles of arithmetic, geometry and algebra, these subjects were discovered by the Muslim scholars. In arithmetic, we still use the numerals and method of counting invented by the Arabs. The invention of algebra itself is attributed to the Arabs, one of the Arab scholars. And his name was Muhammad bin Musa bin Khwarizmi, and algebra is entitled as Al-Jibr wal-Makalala. Now it is from the first part of his work we get the title of Al-Jibr wal-Makalala. This was the name of the book, Al-Jibr wal-Makalala. So from the first part of the book we get the word Al-Jibra, and from the name of the author Al-Khwarizmi, we get the word of algorithm. In the opinion of Dr. Philip, one of the historians, and he was one of the best, he says, one of the best scientific mind of Islam, Al-Khwarizmi, is undoubtedly the man who exercised most influence on the mathematical thought during the whole of Middle Age. Dr. Charles, he writes that trigonometry is the branch of mathematics which the Arab cultivated most diligently because of its application to the astronomy. Because mathematics and astronomy both goes together, so that's why, because the Arab, they like astronomy a lot, so that's why they cultivated the mathematics most diligently. The first step in this science, it dates from Al-Batani. Al-Batani, he was the first to use in his work the expression of sine and cosine. There are certain calculators, I remember when we were in Form 4 or Form 5, you have to buy that calculator, they'll tell you, okay, press this button, something happens, sine, cosine and tangent. So that was, this expression, it was introduced by Al-Batani. The invention of sine, zero, sifr, zero, it was by Muhammad bin Ahmad. In 976 was an invention that revolutionized the whole of mathematics. But it did not come into use in the West until the beginning of 13th century. Now let's take another subject, and that is chemistry. How did the Muslim contributed in the world civilization towards this subject? And there are many other subjects, but we will see as we go along. It will be merely an exaggeration to say that chemistry as a science did not exist before the Arab Muslims. Certainly the Greeks understood some of the elements, but they knew nothing at all about the most important substance, such as alcohol, sulfuric acid, aqua and nitric acid. It was the Arab who discovered all these substances. And if we add to this fact that one of the basic process in chemistry, distillation, was an Arab discovery, and they were the first to use the method of sublimation and method of crystallization, one is forced to recognize that the Arab contribution to this science was really, really great. A great number of terms used in chemistry, such as alcohol, alkali, elixir, all these are the word which is derived from the Arabic, which shows this all these were invented and founded by the Muslim scholars. Without any doubt, the greatest Arab chemist was Abu Musa the Jafar, and he was known as the Jabbar. He lived in